Welcome back, everybody, to Two Ball, Two Bald, where we continue our series talking about our top 10 at each position. Last week we did quarterbacks. This week we're doing running backs. My name is Marshawn Parker.
And I'm Nathan Tomlin. And again, we're doing the top 10 running backs for the 2024 season. So, really just looking at this season um, is kind of how we're doing our rankings. So, I'll go ahead and start with my number 10. And so, for my rankings, how I did it, I looked at a combination of the players' talent level, I think the amount of playing time they're going to get, the situation they're in, the team they're in, all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff, and who I'd want. So for me, number 10 is a guy in his second year, Jameer Gibbs. I have Gibbs at number 10. I think talent wise, he may be higher, but he's in a great situation in Detroit where it's going to prolong his career because David Montgomery is still a very, very productive running back, and they're different styles of running backs. They have a great offensive line. They have a quarterback who has a quick release, um, is very accurate. A lot of people, fantasy wise anyway, were frustrated with Gibbs' lack of touches early on in the season. But I think they were trying to figure out how to use him best. And I think they found that happy zone. I think for him, where he'll be most efficient is 12 to 15 carries and about somewhere between 7 to 10 uh, pass attempts thrown his way, get him in space and things like that. I think if you try and give him the ball 25 times, handing the ball off or tosses, things like that, I don't think his efficiency is that great. He's one of 8 rookie running backs since 2000 with 900 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns and 5 yards per carry. So here's the list. Mike Anderson, Denver, 2000. Shanahan, when they had like different guys in a row, 5 different seasons run for 1,000 yards. As the year Terrell Davis got hurt. Clinton Portis, Denver, 2002. Maurice Jones-Drew, Jacksonville, 2006, who had a run there of about 3 or 4 years where he was one of the best running backs in the league.
Mhm.
Adrian Peterson, Minnesota, 2007, might show up on the all-time list of this top 10.
Mhm.
Zeke, who had one of the best rookie seasons for running backs in at least in the last 25 years or so, in Dallas, 2016. Saquon Barkley, Giants, 2018, and Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis, 2020. Right, so
Mhm.
some guys that have been very productive. In 15 games he played last year, he had 234 touches for 1,261 yards and 11 touchdowns. Um, he had 10 games with over 10 carries. 3 of those were starts. He only had 2 games with 20 touches. They were both starts where David Montgomery missed. He didn't play, right? Um, in college, and it's crazy because you look at it in college, it's very similar. His numbers are right in line. Um, he's not a guy that's going to get 20 touches a game, but he's
Mhm.
extremely efficient. He finds the end zone. Um, he was second in yards after contact per carry last year, which is pretty amazing considering he's a running rookie and you don't really consider him as that type of runner. Um, he made the Pro Bowl as a rookie running back, which is definitely something to hang your hat on. There's only what I think 3 running backs that make it per conference, so top 3 running
Mhm.
back in the NFC last year, um, and fourth in offensive rookie of the year voting. And again, we talked about how offensive rookie of the years and MVPs tend to go towards quarterbacks, so to be that high on the list is pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, he's on my top 10 list. A little higher on my list. But for me, at number 10, I had DeAndre Swift, um, who had a really good year last year. I think would have had an even better year if the Eagles didn't start to crash and burn, towards the end of the year. He had over 1,200 total yards last year, went over 1,000 yards rushing. The biggest issue with him since he's been in the NFL is just can he stay healthy? When he's been healthy, he's elusive. He's been able to be highly productive. The biggest thing was just can he be healthy? I think a lot of another reason he's on my top 10 list is not just the fact that I think he's extremely talented, but I think when you also add in, I think he's going to have a lot of production in the passing game. One thing that we really didn't talk about, and I didn't even bring up, is a guy who just missed my top 10 of quarterbacks going into this next year was Caleb Williams. I had him like 12 on my list, and because I was trying to find a way to get him to 10, and I just couldn't do it. But that's how highly I think of him, and I think that DeAndre Swift is going to have a lot of open lanes because of that, and he's going to have, I think, a probably a career high for him in receiving yards, while still maintaining a high average per carry. Last year he had about 5.3 yards per touch average, which is high, right? I could see him being in the high fours per carry range, and then maybe average about 8, 9 yards a catch. So he's going to be highly productive. I think he'll have more touchdowns than he did last year. Last year he only had 5 touchdowns. But I could
Tush
see him
push.
being, so, yeah, exactly. Whereas I don't think the Bears are going to be in the position to want to risk Caleb Williams being hurt on quarterback sneaks or anything of that nature. So I think his touchdowns will go up, and a lot of it depends on can he continue to stay healthy like he did last year. And I'm hoping and betting that he will be able to. And although we talked about it already, I don't think the Bears are going to have as many wins as maybe the Bears would fans would like, but I think they're going to be highly productive, and there's going to be a lot of promise that's going to allow for the following season and seasons. It's going to be fun to be a Bears fan. I'll put it to you that way moving forward. So he was my number 10.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't have him on my number 10, and I love DeAndre Swift, man. He was
Mm-hmm.
something at Georgia. Last year was really his first year as a starter. I mean, he split time in Detroit.
Yeah.
I disagree with you that he'll have a career high in receiving yards, though, because that's pretty much how Detroit used him. He had close to 500 yards 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Out of the backfield, I don't think he's getting that many receiving yards. I don't think they're going to key him that much with the weapons that they have in the passing game. Um, he's in a good situation. He's a good player. If he can stay healthy, I mean, he could definitely make a Pro Bowl and be on this list. But last year, I don't think he was the top 10 running back. I can't put him there because he hasn't really shown me that he can do it consistently enough for me. But talent wise, I mean, I love the guy. I mean, he was
Mm-hmm.
awesome at UGA. And he's been a good player, in the NFL.
First half
Um,
of the season, he was I want to say top three in rushing yards.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm
but
projecting more towards, I guess, a full season of that type of production. And then again, that I think that Bears offense is going to be electric. So
yeah, yeah. So my number 9, this is probably my surprise player that's on here. But I felt like, man, after the year he had last year, he deserves it. Um, and he's been very productive. Uh, Raheem Mostert,
mhm.
and he's 32, which is very old for a running back, right? But in 2 years in Miami, 390 carries, 1,903 yards, 4.9 yards per carry, 21 touchdowns, 56 catches, 377 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Led the league in rushing touchdowns last year, tied with McCaffrey for total touchdowns. Um, and even in San Francisco, I mean, this as a 49er fan, he wasn't consistently played, but when he was on the field, he was consistently productive. Um, in 6 seasons there, only 284 carries, 1,610 yards, but 5.7 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns, 36 catches for 361 yards, and 3 more touchdowns. So obviously, the big question when Miami got him is if they were going to give him more touches, could he keep that production? Because a lot of
Mhm.
guys when they only see the field and only touch the ball 8 to 10 times. We talked about Devin Akane, right? Who was his running mate back there. He's not going to average almost 10 yards a touch this year. He's going to come back down to earth a little bit. But when you get the ball more, it's harder to keep that per touch number higher. But he's done a good job of that. And he's very explosive. He's very fast. Um, and in that offense, too, I mean, again, he's in a good situation in that offense. He is going to get, about 20 touches a game. He's not going to
Hmm.
get 30 to 40 touches. They're not going to rely on him to, we got to hand the ball to Mostert 25 times or we're going to lose. There are going to be games where he may get 25 carries or maybe games where he gets 5 or 10. That's why I have him towards the back end of the top 10. But just his production is through the roof. So I felt like I had to include him on here.
Yeah, and I was trying to include him on here because he has been highly productive. Only thing with him is he is in his 30s and he has had a hard time staying healthy throughout his career. And he had 18 rushing touchdowns last year. I could see a scenario where he duplicates that, but I could also see a scenario where he plays 3 or 4 games
Mm-hmm.
and I can never pronounce his last name correct. Achoy, I think it is. I could see him being the premier
A
back.
Kane, bro.
Okay, whatever. I could
There's
see
an
him
N in
being
there.
I could see him being the premier back just because throughout Moister's whole career, the thing is, can he stay healthy? And when he's been healthy, he's been incredibly productive because he's a really good running back with sprinter speed. And if there's a crease, he's going to find it. But you know, he would be the guy that you would hate to draft in fantasy league because it's like you might get a really big year with 18 touchdowns, and then you might get a year where he only played 3 games or 4 games because he had nagging knee and ankle injuries. I'm glad you included him though. I tried to find a way to. I couldn't do it, but um, for me, my number 9 is Kyron Williams from the Rams, who had a really big year last year. Um, I I'm high on the Rams offense, just in general, and I think that Sean McVay is kind of known as more of like a quarterback coach, but sneakily, if you look at running backs are highly productive in his offense. Granted, Todd Gurley was an extreme talent, and that aided with him too. But I mean, geez, we talked about this before. Like you can almost stack Todd Gurley's 3 years under McVay against almost anybody in history. I mean, that's how highly productive he was. And Kyron Williams had over 1,200 yards. I want to say for a good portion of the season, I think he was leading the league in rushing. I could see
Per
that.
game. Per game because he had the
That's what it was
injuries.
per game.
Yeah, it's
That's
per
right, per
game.
game.
And he did lead the league
S-
per game.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I could see him duplicating that. Especially because everybody knows running back is and look, there's going to be I think just off the top of my head, there's definitely going to be 2 running backs at the top of the heap. That's in their 30s, but for the most part, running back is a young man's game.
Mhm.
So the most productive running backs years is usually probably between year like 2 and 6. You know, uh, so I could see him being matching the same productivity. Um, Maybe not necessarily leading the league in yards per game, but still duplicating the season where he has 12, 1,300 yards. Maybe even has more receiving yards, maybe more touchdowns, things of that nature, and is a better overall player, and then get to play the full season. So I had him at number 9.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue because I had him at number 8. So,
There we go.
yeah. Yeah, he'll be his birthday is the end of August or beginning of September, so he'll be
Mhm.
24 when the season starts. So he's
Yeah.
young, going in his third year. He led the league yards per game, 95.3 yards per game, 5 yards per carry, 15 total touchdowns at 1,350 yards from scrimmage in 12 games. He played 12 games, I think. The Rams offense should be good. I agree with you on that. I mean, and really for them to be good, they have to run the ball because
Yeah.
I still don't think their offensive line is great. And you got to protect Matt Stafford. He's less mobile than he was before. They have two very, very, very good wide receivers on the outside. Um, so Kyron Williams is going to get some carries, and to your point, McVay does. If you're in an offense with Sean McVay and you're a skill position player, you're going to have opportunities to produce.
Oh yeah.
Um, he puts you in a good situation. But look, I mean, last year in the second year league, he made the Pro Bowl, second team All Pro. I mean, that's a pretty good season, if you ask me. So, yeah, I mean, I had him number 8. I think he's going to have a good year again, barring injury. I mean, that's just the real question with him
Mhm.
as
With
well.
all the
Uh,
guys, really.
yeah, well, both years he's been in the league, he's had some sort
Yeah.
of injury, and they haven't been, super serious to where it's season ending or anything like that. But both seasons he's missed games because of injury, multiple games. So that is one thing to look at. But I think he's going to be very productive. So I definitely see him coming in here. So I had him at number 8. So that was an easy one.
So, my my number 8, and I hope I'm wrong on this because I hope ultimately he ends up being he ends up proving me wrong. But I just when we were making this list, I looked at it and I was like, man, there's a lot of running back talent in the league, a
There's
lot.
a lot. Hmm.
And this is a guy who has run for over 6,000 yards in his career and has been extremely highly productive. Extremely highly productive. But he's also a guy who will be turning 29 this season. He's also a guy, even though we are both, I think, incredibly impressed by how he's demonstrating his current ability to come back. He looks like he's strong as he ever was, but he is getting close to 30 and he is coming off, an MCL and ACL tear.
Hmm.
It's Nick Chubb. I hope, I truly hope he does return to being a top 3, top 4 running back. But when I went with all the young talent and all the production that you're going to see, further along in my list, he's number 8. He's number 8 just because of the unknown going into the season, where I think he's going to be a productive running back. I just don't know if he's going to be better than the 7 other guys I put ahead of him. And when you include that with the injuries and the age, he's at number 8 for me.
So I have him on my list. I do have him higher.
Hmm.
Um, like you said, he's 28, 6 seasons, 5 as a starter. His rookie year, he finished with 996 yards. Otherwise, he would have had 1,000 yards in every season other than
Every
last year,
season.
obviously.
Yeah.
His 4 seasons as a starter, he finished third, uh, seventh, and fourth, or sorry, yeah, seventh, I forget, second, seventh, second, and third in rushing yards. And that season, he finished seventh. He only played 12 games in 2020, and he was actually only 4 yards away from being all the way up to fifth,
Hmm.
um, which is, absolutely insane. 6,511 yards, 48 touchdowns, 5.3 yards per carry. He's second all time among running backs in yards per carry behind Jamal Charles. He's done that on 1,238 carries. this is his career lows. Okay, other than last year where he only he got hurt in the second game
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
season. Now this is taking his career lows. It wasn't all in the same season, but his career low season is 996 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 5 yards per carry.
yeah.
That's a career
That's
low. That
yeah
is a career year for most
for
running
some.
backs.
Hmm.
Um, that's insane. The one question mark is the injury, and he does have a lot of wear and tear because he does have 1,238 carries in the NFL. In 4 years in college, he had 758 carries. And that
Yes,
includes 1 year where his sophomore year, where he tore his ACL, and that's the
yes,
only reason why he went to the second round was the questions on his injury. He obviously rebounded from that fine. Now, granted, he was 20, 19, 20, a little older now, and how he's going to come back from that is going to make a big difference. And he's had 2,000 carries in the NFL and college combined. But I'm not doubting him. I'm not doubting him, man. I'm not doubting him. So I have him higher on my list, but I talk
hmm
about him there. So my number seven, we'll go to number seven. This is a guy you probably have much higher. And I was, I was just looking at it and I was like, look, his potential
hmm
is number one. I mean, that's where I think this guy could be if everything falls how it could. And it's Brees Hall. So he's 23 years old. Last year he had 994 yards, which is 4.5 yards per carry, and he did it on that offense,
hmm
right? And so that's where I think a lot of people are like, come on, the promise is there. Look how good he was on a team that was very one dimensional, some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL. He had 76 catches for 591 yards last year. I thoroughly expect the receptions to drop significantly, probably cut in half, to be honest with you. You know, um, his yards per carry, though, I do expect to increase, and they'll probably be able to run the ball more because they'll have more offensive plays. Um, he had just under 300 touches for 1,585 yards, which was fourth in total yards from scrimmage, second among running backs, behind, of course, Christian McCaffrey. Um, 9 touchdowns. Again, I expect his carries to go up. The offense should definitely be better, but how, he has had injury problems as well as a
hmm
young man. So I'm just very interested to see how the Jets run because even the preseason they're not playing Aaron Rodgers.
hmm
So how's it going to look? And are they going to really just, hey, Brees Hall's the workhorse back and he's getting 25 to 30 touches? Or are they going to be like, look, we're playing the long game, playing the long career with this guy. We're going to give him 15 to 20 touches, spread the ball around, get the other running backs in there. So I'm just curious to see how it is, but it wouldn't shock me if next year he's at number one on this list.
So he's a little higher on my list. Um, for me, for seven, I had Jonathan Taylor, which I tell you, it feels like Jonathan Taylor's been around like in our life forever, and he's only 25.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's because again, if he came around in the 80s or 90s with the college career he had, he would have been
He'd have a number
a
one
big.
pick.
He would have been a god.
He'd have a number one
I,
pick.
I I think people. I encourage any and everybody go look at his college stats. Um, they're bananas. But he's going to go into this year with the contract already settled, so he's not going to be holding out. Um, I think having Anthony Richardson along with him is going to be able to free up, the RPOs and the run options, that all that kind of stuff will allow him to have more freedom to run because there's going to be a lot of fear of Anthony Richardson himself keeping the ball and tucking the ball and going himself. So that's going to allow him to be able to probably have a lot more open lanes than he's had in his career. I like the Colts offensive line. I'm a huge Quentin Nelson fan. I think he's. I'm not saying he's the absolute best lineman in the league, but he's by far the nastiest lineman in the league. I mean that dude. I don't even know if he likes football. I know he likes contact. He's one of those guys. Um, and I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be out on a bit of a revenge tour to show that he definitely deserved this contract. The last 6 games of the year, um, if I'm not mistaken, I think he ended the season with a touchdown in each of the last 6 games of the year. Um, and I see him and Richardson having highly productive fantasy seasons. But as we said before, I think we both agreed that from a win total standpoint, they're not going to have the best season. But kind of just like the Bears, I think that they're going to, between Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson and the big plays they display this year, they're going to bring a lot of hope to Indianapolis going into 2025. So I'm predicting a big year out of him.
Yeah, I have him a lot higher, so I'll save my commentary on Jonathan Taylor.
Okay.
Number 5, I have
Wait, number six. Number six.
oh, that's right. I had Nick Chubb number 6. So
Okay.
uh,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, and I just talked about Chubb. So go ahead with your
Yeah.
number 6.
Well. Okay. Well. So my number six is Brees Hall. So I mean, we can.
Gotcha.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So then my number 5,
Uh,
and this, man, so my top 5 really, I mean, I don't know how many times I switched them around, to be honest with you.
I hear you.
So my number 5, I went with the second oldest, eldest statesman. I think he's older. Yeah, second eldest statesman on my running back list. So you already know who that is.
Yeah.
Um, King Henry, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I mean, I almost put him as high as second. I had him anywhere between second, third, fourth, and fifth, and I was like, where am I going to put him? He's 30. That's the one negative,
Yeah.
right? 6 seasons as a starter. He finished in 2018. His first season as starter. He finished 7th in rushing yards, 3rd in touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
In 2019, 1st in rushing yards, 1st in touchdowns. 2020, 1st in rushing yards, 1st in touchdowns. 2021, 9th in rushing yards, 6th in touchdowns in 8 games. Okay.
He was on pace
There were
for he
17
was on
games
pace to
that
break that
year.
record. Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
17 games that year. Those 8 games, he finished 9th in the league in rushing yards and
Yeah.
6th in touchdowns. Okay. In 2022, 2nd rushing yards, tied for 2nd in touchdowns. And last year, 2nd in rushing yards and 7th in touchdowns, which, of course, last year is really when Tennessee, the wheels just fell off the wagon. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, Ryan Tannehill came back down to earth after a couple of years of being a lot better than he had been his whole career. 4 of the last 5 years, he's led the league in carries.
Mm-hmm.
Last season was his fewest attempts per game, 16 and a half, since his first season as a starter in 2018. And that year, he started 12 of the 16 games, and he averaged 13 and a half attempts a game.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love him in Baltimore's offense. How they utilize him and how much run they're going to give him is going to determine where he is on this list, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, last year, Baltimore, as an offense, they had 393 running back carries. Okay. They had 21 rushing touchdowns by running backs. Derrick Henry is better than anybody they had, and it's
Yeah.
not close.
Yeah.
It's not close. Gus Edwards led the team in carries and touchdowns. He had 198 carries and 13 touchdowns. They averaged as a team 23 and a half carries per game by people not named Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anybody other than Lamar, 23 and a half carries. He's not going to catch any passes, and Baltimore doesn't do that anyway. They only had 56 catches by running backs last year. That's 3 a game.
Yeah. Yeah.
5 of those are going to be Derrick Henry. Okay, and it's really going to be like I don't know. Lamar's about to be sacked. He's in the grasp, and Derrick Henry's the guy that's there, and he throws him the ball.
Yeah.
That's it. Otherwise, I mean, they're subbing Derrick Henry out, putting somebody else there. So to me, it really just comes down to how many carries he gets, because I think he's going to average close to 5 yards a carry in that offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to get over 10 touchdowns simply because of when they get close, he's going to be in, right? When they get at the 2 yard line, Derrick Henry's in the backfield. You
Mm-hmm.
know, he may not get the 9 carries on one drive that he's used to getting, but he's going to get those ones close. So he's going to be highly productive on that offense. So I have him at my number 5.
So my number 5 is Gibbs. I think
Wow.
that I think he is going to be the most, not the best running back, but the most dynamic running back. He 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 to me looks like he is going to develop into um, the Tyreek Hill version of a running back. Not at that level. I mean, we again we've said Tyreek Hill's a Hall of Famer, but what I mean by that is I don't know that he'll ever be the best running back, but he will more than likely develop into the scariest running back, the most dangerous running back. The guy, when I mean scary, meaning the guy that you just feel like at any time he can break for an 80 yarder.
Mhm.
Um, he is really good. I knew
Mhm.
he was good at Alabama, and watching those Alabama games, you knew he was good. I mean, honestly, that Alabama team, if it weren't for him and Bryce Young, that team probably would have won like 6 games. That was not a good team. Jameer Gibbs.
For Alabama,
Well,
not a
okay,
good team.
Alabama, yeah, for Alabama standards, right? Which is saying something, but um, he's dynamic. He's dynamic, but I'll say this too because, well, do you want me to say, because my 4 you've mentioned already, but
You
do
can go ahead and say it.
so my 4 is Derrick Henry, who I think he's going to lead the league in touchdowns this year.
Mhm.
I would be willing to lay down good hard earned money that he is going to lead the league in rushing touchdowns this year. As far as yardage, I don't know what their plan is for him. He is 30, and I think the Ravens, for the most part, are going to be thinking long term, and they're
Mhm.
they're going to be thinking about, hey, let's get to the tournament and make sure everybody, by the time we get to the playoffs, is in good health. But I feel comfortable in saying he's going to lead the league in rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the reason I had Gibbs at 10 and not higher
Hmm.
is because we know his role on that team,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
David Montgomery is going to get more carries than Jameer Gibbs. That's just how that offense runs. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so that's why I can't put a guy that's not the number one, the guy in top 5. That for me, you know what
No,
I
I
mean?
understand.
Like I
Yeah.
said, talent wise, I think I agree with you. He is different
Hmm.
than these other guys. Um, so then my number 4, and again, like I said, my top 5. This is another guy I had anywhere from 2 to 5,
Hmm.
and I'm just hoping that the coaching change and the improved quarterback play will allow him to show what he is
Hmm.
capable of, and that's Bijan Robinson.
Hmm.
And last year he averaged 16 touches a game for 86 yards per game. He's extremely dynamic. He had almost 1,500 scrimmage yards. Now he has a quarterback,
Yeah.
right? And on top of that, now he has. We'll see. It's a different offensive system, but hopefully, it's guys that will. You draft a guy 8th overall. Eighth, he's eighth, right? I think he was 8th overall.
7 or 8
Um,
something like that.
something like that. Top
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
as an offensive skill position player. How do you not try to get that guy the ball? Early in the season, I understood it because he had an injury in college. So, okay, you're working it back into it. But by the end of the year, why was that guy not touching the ball 25 times a game?
Yeah.
Um, Atlanta has an opportunity to be extremely dynamic on offense, depending on the
Yes.
health of Kirk Cousins. Um, they have two good running backs. Algier is a solid backup running back.
Yes,
They
he is.
have, unfortunately, the injury to Rondale Moore hurts, and he's out for the year, and that is a
Hmm.
big blow. But
Hmm.
Darnell Mooney being opposite of Drake London, they're different types of receivers, so they complement each other well. And worst comes to worst, Kyle Pitts you can split out wide, or you could put Bijan Robinson in the slot, put Algier behind
Yes.
in the backfield. There's a lot of things you can do with the personnel they have. Um, Look, he had this is insane, right? As a receiver, he had negative 32 yards total before the catch. Total. So the course of the entire season, all of his catches, which means mostly they were screen passes, right? They were
Yeah.
screen passes,
Behind
bubble
the line of
screens,
scrimmage.
things
Hmm.
like that. And then even when he was out running routes, he was catching very shallow passes. This is a guy I feel like he has the talent level. I think he has the skill that he can go out. If you can get him where he's matched up on a linebacker, let him run a route, you
Hmm.
know, like the 49ers do with McCaffrey, right? Where, hey, a halfback option route, he could run a little curl, he could run it out, he could run in, go route, wheel, stuff like that. I mean, the guy's got skill. Um, Based on just talent, I mean, I'm actually excited. We get all the Falcons games. I'm actually looking forward to it. It's like finally we actually get to watch a team that's worth watching. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, those 1 o'clock games, 1 p.m. Eastern games over here, the only game on is the Falcons, and boy, they were rough. And now it's like, cool. I'm actually kind of excited to be able to see them play a little bit. But yeah, I had Bijan Robinson as my number 4. So we'll go to your number 3 then, I guess.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Go ahead.
Which is Bijan.
Okay.
Yeah. I I think I felt like for my top three, I wouldn't have been mad if my top three, if you had any of them at number one.
Hmm.
I think that Bijan is a generational talent at running back. Um, Everything he can do, and I would ask people go look at his highlights from last year. Go look at his highlights. It's like watching video game highlights, and it's funny because, and I think we both have said this over and over. The fact that they not barely, but the fact that they did not fully utilize Bijan and Kyle Pitts last year, that had to be the reason the coach had to be fired. Even beyond the record, is you have this generational talent, and I like Tyler Algier. I think you still carve out a good role for him
Hmm.
in the offense, but he should never have more touches in the game than Bijan does, unless Bijan's hurt. I remember there was a game where everybody thought Bijan was hurt because he wasn't
No
in the
touches
game.
in the first half. Yeah.
So
Like
it's like,
3 plays
well,
he played or something in the first
he
half.
must have got, maybe he's hurt, maybe he's sick. I mean, it was like maybe he has COVID. We don't know. I don't know. And it was none of the above.
That coach was awful.
And you're talking about, I mean, he's literally a generational talent, and exactly what you would want in a running back in today's offense.
Mhm.
So he was my number three.
So my number 3 is a guy you mentioned earlier, Jonathan Taylor. Man, look,
Okay.
he's 25.
Hmm.
That's it. Going in his
Yeah.
5th year, right? He's had 2 down years, right? One with injuries and then one the contract dispute. Listen, these are the 2 down years combined. 21 games, 1,602 yards, 11 touchdowns, 4.4 yards per carry, 76 yards a game. That's still pretty good. The
Hmm.
first 2 seasons, he played 32 total games, 30 starts. He had 564 carries, right? He had 2,980 yards, 29 touchdowns, 5.3 yards per carry. Now, let's take away year number 2. It was a massive year. Really hard to expect someone to duplicate a year like he had, right?
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
guys don't do that more than once. the three other seasons are more in line with each other. So even his rookie season was actually very good. Anthony Richardson's the key, though, man. He's going to open up the field. His accuracy is going to determine a lot about Jonathan Taylor. In the season Jonathan Taylor has. Look, he already has 4,582 yards and 40 touchdowns in his career, and he's 25. You know, but if you look at his advanced metrics, and this is why I think that he is still elite. This is why I do have him at number 2. His yards
Mhm.
after contact was the same as in 2021. His yards before contact was 1 yard less. So what does that mean? That means your offensive line didn't do as good. Why? Well, a couple things. Quentin Nelson got hurt 2 years ago. Okay.
Mhm.
Last year was his first year back.
Yeah.
He was not the same yet. I think he will be there this year. But he
Yes.
was not, he missed time. And when he came back the last 2 years, he's been slowly getting up to where he needed to be. Ryan Kelly missed time to center. You had injuries on the offensive line. Last year, quarterback, of course, didn't really know what was going on. You pointed out earlier, the last 6 games, he was rolling. His attempts per broken tackle was actually better, which means that it took him less carries to break tackles. So he was breaking tackles more frequently, and his drop percentage as a receiver was lower.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
decreased every year. So he's actually getting better.
Mhm.
When you look at the advanced metrics, he just doesn't have that same amount of room to run prior to somebody touching him. If they get that 1 yard back, now you look and you're just like, well, man, he's right on par with what he was doing. So that's why I have Jonathan Taylor at 3, which means that I'm going to assume our top 2 are the exact same 2 guys. And my number 2 is Saquon.
Yeah.
And, Saquon, you have to really know football and understand the organization that he played for to really kind of get the full picture of Saquon Barkley. He
Yes.
had one absolutely great season. He had one really good season. The other seasons were just kind of okay,
Mhm.
but his teams were awful.
Yeah.
Last year, he was 37th in the league in yards before contact. 37th. There's 32 teams.
Mhm.
He will be in a better offense. He will be utilized better, right?
Mhm.
You can't just key on Saquon in this offense, and I think that's going to be huge.
Mhm.
You have a quarterback that's not just competent. We both had the quarterback in the top 10. I have a feeling we'll have at least one of their receivers in the top 10.
Mhm.
Their offensive line may potentially have people in the top 10, but as a whole, as a unit, they're very good.
Mhm.
His 2 best seasons, if you combine them, right? He had 2,619 yards, 21 touchdowns in 32 games.
Mhm.
His yards per carry in those 2 seasons were 5 and 4.4. The other
Mhm.
3 seasons combined plus 2 games because he got hurt, right? Um, this season, then he got hurt after in the second game. The other, so 3 seasons combined was 2,592 yards, so less yards in 3 seasons versus 2, 14 touchdowns, and that was in 10 more games in 42 games. His yards per carry, one was actually 4.6, which wasn't terrible, and then
Yeah.
3.7 and 3.9. But in terms of just raw talent, when you look at Saquon Barkley and you just watch him with the ball in his hands, you know he's elite.
Yeah.
You don't need to look at stats. You don't need to look at the box score. The box score can be so deceiving. And really the only reason those years he had that were big, his yards per carry being 5 or 4.5, is because he would break off a 40-yard run, right? After breaking a tackle at the line of scrimmage, and then boom, he's got 30, 40 yards, and that just obviously inflates your numbers a little bit. But he is so dynamic, and I expect a lot of big runs from Saquon. Um, I think he's going to be utilized in the passing game better. He'll probably have less catches, but he's going to catch the ball in space instead of, oh, no one's open here, catch the ball, and then there's 3 guys, around him after a yard or 2. So Saquon's my number 2.
Yeah. I mean, Saquon's my number two. I think Derrick Henry's going to lead the league in rushing touchdowns. I think Saquon's going to lead the league in rushing yards. His career high is 1,312 yards. He's going to easily top that. For me, I think his floor is 1,500.
If he's
So
healthy,
say it again.
he's another guy. If he's healthy,
Oh yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I can tell you, I I wouldn't be surprised if he runs for 16, 1,700 yards. It just depends on how they utilize him. If they feed him the rock all year, or if they start kind of preserving him for the playoffs. A lot of these different things, but another guy that I would be willing to bet harder money on the fact of that, yeah, he's gonna have the rushing crown. He's gonna lead the league in rushing. And I've said it before, I'll continue to say it, is that Saquon Barkley has always been really good, and he's going to have an outstanding year, and then people are going to realize, oh yeah, he played for the Giants. Um, he played for a terrible organization that made a lot of terrible choices. Quite honestly, one of the terrible choices was them drafting him.
yeah.
He should have never been a Giant. They should have drafted Quentin Nelson.
Mhm.
Um, and had a Pro Bowl lineman before you try to draft a Pro Bowl running back when the rest of the roster is in shambles. Especially they ended up trading Odell a couple of years later, and Eli was at the tail end of his career.
Yeah.
But yeah, Saquon is probably. I mean, so obviously neither of us believe he's the best running back, since he's number two. But I feel comfortable saying he's the most talented running back.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, my one
Yeah,
through five, I
yeah,
don't think, you could put any of them at 1 through 5 to me,
yeah,
and I wouldn't be mad. There's an argument
no,
for any of them,
yeah,
but that brings me to number one, and there's only one answer for it right now,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he's
yeah.
coming off the best year of his career. He's in his prime. He's 28. Um, Probably the back end of the prime, more than likely
Yeah.
out of most running backs. Um, Led the league in rushing, led the league in touches, scrimmage yards, tied for total touchdowns. He's done that now. All of those things he's done now 2 times in his career. He's on one of the best offenses in the league, one of the best teams in the league. He gets about last year he had around 21 touches a game for about 125 yards. I mean, the efficiency, right? He's had over 500 catches in his career for over
Hmm.
4,300 yards. He already has over 10,000 total yards and 80 touchdowns. 4 seasons that he's played 16 games or more, right? Every single one over 1,000 yards. His average in those seasons is 4.7 yards per carry, 67 catches, 500 over 550 yards, and 13 touchdowns or more in every season that he's been able to play the full season. So when he plays a full season, he gets over 1,500 all-purpose yards. He catches
Hmm.
over 60 balls, gets over 5 yards a touch, and gets over 13 total touchdowns. Right now he's the answer. I don't think you can put anybody else at number one right now. Um, Going into the year. Again, by the end of the year it may change, but going into the year, I don't see how anyone else is number one.
No. Yeah. I mean, I he had to be number one going into the season. Will he remain that way going into towards the end of the season? Will he be next year? I don't know. He's getting up there in age. But right now he's in my opinion uh, top four offensive players in the league. Now,
Well,
obviously, if you
he
wanted
won the
to,
offensive player of the year, so
yeah, yeah, and I think I'd say the two guys who are more dangerous all around, because Christian McCaffrey is not only the best running back, but you can make an argument that that if he switched positions literally to receiver, he would probably be a top tier number two receiver in the league.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, he runs great routes.
he
That's what
runs,
I mean
yeah,
about the Falcons using
yeah,
Bijan
yeah,
that way. You know, get him out there in space on a
in
line, and,
space.
and especially because they got linebackers trying to guard him.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not like he's going up against a shutdown corner.
No,
When he's running
not even
routes,
a
he's
not
going
even a
against a
safety.
linebacker.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So I mean, I don't even know what else to say. I mean, if
yeah,
anybody, hey, I tell you this. This is what I'll say. If anyone disagrees that Christian McCaffrey is the number one running back, please tell us who you think is and why.
yeah,
I love to
yeah.
hear it. And just in general, we want to hear. We love to hear who you guys' top 10 running backs are, top five, top three.
Mhm.
Do you agree or disagree with anything we said? But there's really nothing even much more to add to Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah,
He's
and
he
I
he yeah,
think we had pretty much all the same top 5, except I had Jonathan Taylor in there, and you had,
yeah,
Jahmyr Gibbs. Other than that, I think
yeah,
we had pretty much the same top 5, maybe a little bit different order, but
yeah.
yeah.
I was very interested to see what yours was going to look like.
Yeah,
I had a feeling at the back end ours might be very different.
and it really
But
wasn't.
yeah,
It really was. I had Mostert on there, and you had,
Swift.
Swift, and
Yeah,
and look, I
I think that's
mean,
about it, right?
yeah, and look, mine. I'll be honest. My top 8, I knew were going to be on there. My
Yeah,
9 and 10, again, my only reservation on Gibbs was we know he's splitting. We know he's
yeah,
splitting, and
yeah,
so for this year, it's like, okay, these other guys, those top 8 are 100% like they're number ones. They're not splitting.
yeah,
Really. Um, Nick Chubb, a matter of when he comes back to.
yeah,
But then Mostert and Gibbs are kind of splitting. Swift, I guess, is a true number one, but I could see them potentially splitting with Khalil Herbert, who's done
yeah,
pretty well for them,
yeah. He's a good
as
back.
well, especially with Swift's injury history. But yeah, overall, we had a lot of most of the same guys, just in a little bit different order. So
Yeah, yeah. No, look, I again doing this exercise. There's a lot of good running back talent, and it's even the next episode when we talk about receivers, you want to talk about. I mean, geez, there's so many good receivers in the league.
that
But I
there's
was pleasantly
yeah,
surprised at how many good running backs there were. Yeah,
yeah. No, receivers is difficult.
yeah,
Um, It's difficult. It's difficult.
yeah,
With that one, we may have I think our top 3 or 4 may be the same, but other than that, we could have all different guys, you
yeah.
know?
Could be. But I think our
Yeah.
top five, I think, will be pretty consistent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So, all right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. This was, again, the top 10 running backs. Let us know what you think. Let us know who we missed, who you think should have been on this list, and, who you'd replace on the list. Thank you again for your support. We appreciate you. Have a good one.
yeah. Take care.